Here's one person's experience being autistic.
My name is Glenn Williams. I'm 58 years old and I was diagnosed with autism in 2017. It really wasn't that hard to get diagnosed. I just went to my general practitioner and he recommended a doctor who spent an hour and a half with me, and he gave me some tests and talked to me, and at the end he said, "Yes, sir, you have autism." Having autism, some people might notice that I have trouble sometimes looking directly into people's eyes, making eye contact. Also, what people say is my face may lack affect, or I might seem emotionless. But of course, this isn't true. It's just not showing on my face. But things that people don't notice is how my brain works. I'm a very eclectic thinker. So if I'm talking with someone, I am listening, but I'm thinking of a lot of different things that are related to what they're saying at the same time. Even though I have a service dog, a lot of people don't think that I'm autistic when they see me because I'm not flapping my hands or spinning or talking to myself, but it is pretty pervasive thing. Autism for me has been a strength because of the eclectic thinking. I'm a very good troubleshooter. And so, whereas others might have a tendency to focus or to hyper focus on just a certain area, I'm very good at taking a lot of steps back and sort of looking at a lot of aspects of a system and kind of seeing how they all interrelate. And I'm very, of course, with attention to detail, I'm very good at finding things in a system that aren't right, and they often lead to a problem. So that's been a blessing throughout my life that I have that skill. Something that's challenging with autism is sometimes an autistic person may feel lonely, and it's because of our social deficit, and we don't speak the same kind of hidden language that the rest of the world does all the time. And so the nonverbal things, especially, are hard for us to kind of figure out. And so the kind of the dance of social interaction sometimes is hard for us to figure out and do successfully or very successfully, and so sometimes it can be lonely. But overall, I can say too that having had a relationship with God, what I can say is that at the beginning, I began to just feel like I just didn't fit in and that I tried to be like everybody else. And then when having a relationship with Christ, I know that what I need to do is just to accept who I am, embrace who I am, and rejoice in who I am. Stop trying to be like everyone else and be the best person that I can be, that God intended for me to be. And when I do that, then I find that he can use me to make differences in the world and to encourage others in ways that I just can't even, sometimes imagine or believe how it happens. But so I'm in a better place now after all these years, and I just am happy to be who I am and serving the Lord.
My name is Stephen Bedard. I'm currently 55 years old, and I was diagnosed at around the age of 45, although there were plenty of suspicions before that time. My two biological children both have autism, and I had recognized some similarities between my children and myself. I would say that the process of getting diagnosed was relatively easy. As I've said, my wife and I had suspected that I was autistic for some time. I was not sure how to go about getting a diagnosis, as my children had been diagnosed by a developmental pediatrician before the age of 3. So, during a regular appointment with my family doctor, I asked how I should do this. Fortunately, his clinic had a partnership with a psychologist's office, and he made a referral. I met with a psychologist associate on a number of occasions, doing tests and surveys, and a survey was given to my wife as well. After consulting with the psychologist associate met with me again and informed me that it was a clear case of autism. I'm thankful that because it was referred by my doctor and I was in Canada, that the diagnosis was free. I know a number of people, including Canadians, who are unable to get a diagnosis because of the cost. I'm still processing this diagnosis. In the early years, I still had moments of doubting whether or not I was really autistic. I've since become much more comfortable with my autistic identity. Before moving on, I'd like to say that when I told my nonverbal autistic son that I also had been diagnosed with autism, he shook my hand as if welcoming me to the club. If you met me, would you know that I was autistic? I suppose other autistic people would. My most obvious traits include my facial expressions. I usually have a very deadpan expression, even when telling a joke. I'm socially awkward and I do not make friends easily. People might also recognize that when I'm interested in something, I go all out. For example, I'm interested in school and have 5 university degrees and would do more if I had the time and money. P.S. I am seriously considering one more. One of the autistic traits that people might not notice is my slow processing. It takes me a while to process things, but I'm able to camouflage it in a way that most people do not notice. I also struggle with executive functioning. Some might notice a lack of organization, but executive functioning is deeper than that, and only recently am I recognizing how it has affected me. By the way, I do stim, but only in front of my wife and only in the most stressful of times. Some people might doubt I have autism because I'm a pastor, and being a pastor would require skills that many people doubt are consistent with autism. I'm also married with children, something that some do not expect of people with autism. My autism is a strength in that I tend to look for patterns in anything I encounter. This allows me to find connections that might not be apparent to everyone, or at least not as quickly. Also, when I'm interested in something, I tend to go all in. When this overlaps with aspects of my occupations, this can be a tremendous advantage. For example, the Second World War has long been one of my special interests. As a military chaplain, this can be helpful as military history often comes up in conversation at my unit. It does not come across as imposing my interest because it's frequently brought up within the military context. While in general I find my autism to be a good thing, there are times that it can be challenging. One of the challenges is in the area of empathy. The stereotype is that autistic people lack empathy. This is a myth. Autistic people may experience empathy in some different ways from neurotypicals. But for myself, I find myself to be hyper empathetic, meaning that I take on other people's emotions in such an intense way that I need time to recover afterward. I should mention that I first recognized this after observing the same phenomena in my autistic children. As I look back to my diagnosis and my life since then, I can recognize how my faith has sustained me through this. I am sure there are some people who see autism as a curse and they wonder why God would make them that way. For myself, I see neurodiversity as a part of God's beautiful creation. When I look at Paul's picture of the church as a body in 1 Corinthians 12, I see the promotion of unity with diversity rather than uniformity. Autism is not a glitch in God's creation, but rather a part of a planned diversity that makes everything work better. Having said that, I do acknowledge that there are challenges in autism, both for myself and my children. I believe in those moments when we feel the least in control that we can rely upon God to sustain. Not that God necessarily changes our circumstances immediately, but that God gives us glimpses of grace in the midst of the challenges. Looking back, I'm thankful that God has created me this way, and I attempt to trust in God's strength for whatever comes my way.
Well, like most people on the autistic spectrum, I was verbally handicapped, apparently, but it's apparent. My mother would say, yeah, Hugh only has 3 words, yes, no, and cookie. And you can get pretty far with those 3 words.
Cookie's good, yes.
But what I learned was if I did speak, I would get into trouble, because people on the spectrum tend to be really blunt and honest. And so I got reprimanded for saying, oh, look at that lady, she's really fat.
Yeah.
Or that man's really dirty.
Yeah.
And so I basically said, if I'm going to stay out of trouble, I got to keep my mouth shut. Also, because I was quiet, all of my parents' friends in Montreal, where I spent my first 4 years, insisted that I was mentally handicapped and that I needed to be put into an institution. My parents, I could hear them saying, they defended me and basically said, no, we've seen what he does. Have you ever watched him play? He's not mentally handicapped. But growing up in Vancouver, I was in school, I wasn't speaking, and also I had dexterity problems. I couldn't make a pencil make numbers and letters. So in grade 1, I was failing in all the subjects. And looks like I was going to have to repeat grade 1. But 6 weeks before the end of the school year, our parents moved from a small rented house into a condemned home that they were going to rebuild. So I had this grade 1 teacher, Lila Campbell, for just 6 weeks. Somehow she saw the frustration on my face and said, stay after school, I want to ask you some questions. And she had about 30 books on her desk, and she asked me questions about those books. She figured out that even though I wasn't speaking, that I was reading. I had read the books, I gave the correct answers. So she said, look, I know you're failing in all your subjects, but I'm going to try to get you into grade 2. So she went to bat for me with the principal, and I got into grade 2. But here I am in grade 2. And at that time in Canada, your seating in the class depended on your academic standing. I was in the last chair. And even though the teacher never made it clear, all the students knew. And so I got teased all the time for being the class dummy. But I said, okay, I'm going to have to talk. No matter how much trouble I get into, I'm going to start talking. And between grade 1 and grade 2, my parents said that I was obsessive. I was spending hours a day practicing how to make a pencil, make numbers and letters. But when I entered grade 2, I could make the pencil do what I needed it to do. And so there'd be a set of tests every few weeks. Every few weeks I'd move up a few chairs. And by the end of grade 2, I was in the first chair.
Wow. Yeah.
So what I could say to parents who have children on the spectrum, they have a special gift. Help them find that gift. In my case, I kind of found it on my own. I went to the library and I said, oh, I just love physics and astronomy. And what I share with parents who have children that are on the spectrum, expose them to material that's 8 or 9 grade levels above where they are and see what grabs their attention. And typically, give them, say, freshman college texts. And the one thing you can do is kind of put lines around a paragraph that you know they're going to be able to comprehend and see their eyes go to the more complicated material. That's your clue. And then if that's all they want to study, and that's typical of people on the spectrum, they kind of get locked in to just one subject, then you can encourage that. So
Great advice.
and then
You suppose you chose to be proactive rather than reactive. I mean, you could have done what a lot of kids on the spectrum do, is just basically retreat and form a shell and never come out.
Well, I did some of that. My parents were worried that I just spent all my time in my room, and we had one book, and I was reading that one book. But when I was in grade 2, our teacher took us to the public library. And so I would actually get bus fare from my parents, and every Saturday I would go to the Vancouver Public Library and come home with 5 books on astronomy and physics. So,
Really?
yeah, and every week I would read 5 books on those
How old
subject matter.
at this point?
I was 7.
7, you're reading astronomy and physics.
Correct.
Did your parents clue in, this kid is brilliant?
They told me they knew I was brilliant from the time I was 2 years of age, because they said they watched me doing science experiments without any motivation starting at age 2.
At age 2?
At age 2. And so they said, and I wasn't talking, but they said, we know something's going on there. A number of my friends are saying, Hugh, you need to consider the fact that you're either autistic or you've got Asperger's. And at first I said, nah, it can't be. You know, I don't see that. But, you know, I had enough people saying that to me, especially my wife said it to me. I said, you know what, I'm going to start taking the tests. And what I discovered is if you go online, there's like 16, 20 different tests you can take. So I decided to just take all the tests. But I also thought it would be important to have that confirmed. So I asked my friends and my wife to take those tests as if they were me. And so I want to make sure we were being objective about this, because it'd be easy for me to read things in there. And so I looked at the way they would evaluate me on the tests and the way I evaluated myself on the tests, and it was encouraging that there was consensus. So I was trying to be careful not to allow my own personal biases get in the way. But the fact that my friends and myself all came up with the same conclusion, that I either had severe Asperger's or mild autism, somewhere in that line.
My name's Ron Sandison. My current age is 49 years old, and I'll be 50 on May 10th, then I'll be over the hill. And I was diagnosed with autism in 1982 at age 7. And when I was diagnosed, only 1 in 10,000 children were diagnosed with autism. Now it's 1 in every 36 children will be diagnosed with autism. And the process that led to my diagnosis with autism is my development. It began normal. I was able to say my first word, mommy, at 9 months. And then at 18 months, I went from being able to saying mommy to only mom. And my mom knew there was something drastically different between my brother Steve and Chucky, who were older than me, and me. And she took me to pediatrician. And the pediatrician said, men are like fine wine. You got to give them time. And my mom knew that time was the essence. She immediately got me in intense speech therapy. I was in intense speech therapy all the way from age 2 to age 16. And when I was 7 years old, my speech was so delayed, my brother Chuck would introduce me to people saying, you need to meet my brother Ron. I think he's from Norway. And no one was able to understand my language because it was so delayed except for my immediate family. And when I was 7 years old, my mom took me to Henry Ford Hospital when the school specialist wanted to diagnose me as emotionally impaired. And in 1982, I was diagnosed with autism. And when I was diagnosed, the school specialists and experts said that if I had autism, I'd never read beyond the 7th grade level, never attend college, never have meaningful relationships, and never excel in sports. And my mom, being a great mom, was determined to prove the experts wrong. She quit her job as an art teacher and became a full-time Ron teacher. And working with me and developing my skills, I've been able to go to college, get married, have a daughter who's 8 years old, and have success in life. The process for me was pretty easy. I was 7 years old. My mom took me to the specialist to get diagnosed. So it wasn't really a hard process since I was diagnosed early in life. Some of my autistic traits is I sometimes stem. I love wearing a ring that goes in a circle, so I can move my ring in a circle and stem. One of my autistic quirks that stands out is my special interest in animals. I have a prairie dog that when I was as a young child, all the way from age 7 to age 16, I carried that prairie dog everywhere. And even now, whenever I go and speak places, I bring my prairie dog and I bring my honey badger. And those are kind of my special interest. So some of the traits people may not notice with me is my sensory overload. I've learned ways to being able to have coping skills to deal with them. But one of the things I hate that someone might not notice is a change in my routine. Whether it's a change in not being able to do something at a certain time, or when at work they change my work schedule. I really don't like that. And I don't like a change in my environment, moving to a new place or getting a new area work assignment at work. And at work I always follow the same routine. I do 2 groups every day when I work at the hospital. I also do my rounds at the same time each day. And when I take the patients for lunch, I always take them for lunch and then stay back for dinner and get everything ready for group. So some people may not notice that I have to have a routine. That's a big part of my autistic traits that don't stand out. And some people might not think I'm autistic for these reasons. Number one, I've had the same job working at the hospital, Havenwick Hospital, for 16 years. Number two, I speak at 70 events a year on autism in large crowds. So people may say, look at how successful he is. I also have a Master Divinity, graduating with 4.0. I also work as a professor part-time at Destiny School of Ministry. And people may see those things and say, well, he's married, he has a child, he works full-time, he's gainfully employed. Those aren't the types of things we think of when we think of autism. And my autism strength is this: my amazing memory ability. I can quote word perfect or 15,000 Bible verses, including 22 books of the New Testament. I can also, with my autistic quirks, I'm able to translate most Bible verses in my head that I have memorized from Greek into English. And I've translated 2/3 of the New Testament from Greek into English. I've also never missed a day of work. So those are some of the gifts that autism's given me. I've also, since 2015, spoken live to over 250,000 people. I also have 3 traditionally published books. My first book, A Parent's Guide to Autism, Practical Advice, Biblical Wisdom, published by Charisma House, was a top-selling Christian book on autism all time for parenting. And my challenges with autism, one of them is sensory issues. I hate boom, boom. There's a song, it's all about the bass. You give me bass, I'm going to give you a can, a kick. Well, you can fill in the blank. I do not like loud noises. I also do not like things like nail polish. My wife, when she uses nail polish, she has to go outside. I hate the smell of nail polish. My faith is very important to me. I'm a licensed Assemblies of God minister, and I'm the first autistic licensed Assemblies of God minister. And 2 Corinthians says it best: we have these treasures in jars of clay, so this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. And autism has given me the ability to memorize vast amounts of scripture and also to connect with God. In my weakness, his power is made perfect, 2 Corinthians 12:9. And my mom prayed that the Holy Spirit would show her how to educate me and develop my gifts. She was inspired by Proverbs 22:29. Do you see a man or woman skilled in their labor? They will serve before kings and not obscure men. And my faith is very important to me. One of the ways autism helps me with my faith is memorizing the Bible. I spend 2 hours every day that I have off memorizing new Bible verses. And when I do rounds, I always have on note cards, Bible verses, and I'm memorizing new verses every few days. And my favorite verse, in fact, has to do with autism. Psalms 84:11-12 says, "For the Lord God is sun and shield, the Lord bestows favor and honor, and no good thing does he withhold from those whose walk is blameless. O Lord Almighty, bless the man who trusts in you." And a delay does not mean a denial with autism. In that verse it says, "No good thing does God withhold from those whose walk is blameless." And we're not blameless, but in Christ we are blameless because he's taken up our sin. And a lot of times people hear the word autism and they think of things that people may miss out on. Being invited to birthday parties, being able to drive, being able to have a career. But I'm here to say, as an adult with autism, is that God has provided all my needs according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus. And he hasn't withheld anything. And he's been a son to me, provider. He's been a shield to me, a protector. And as I trust in him, as I learn social skills, God opens up doors beyond anything I could ever imagine. And I want to encourage you, if you're on the autism spectrum and you're an adult, that there's hope. That God has people. You need a support team. People understand autism and can teach you those social skills, who can teach you how to connect with your coworkers in the workplace, and also how to be able to enjoy a high quality of life. Right now in the United States, less than 20% of adults with autism are gainfully employed. Right now in the United States, the average life expectancy is 54 years old. But with the right resources, the right support team, we can thrive on the spectrum. In my 4th book, Adulting on the Spectrum, An Insider's Guide for Navigating Life with Autism, will be out in March. And I want to encourage you, read resources on autism. Thanks so much.
I'm Aaron Hurd. I got diagnosed when I was 43. I've just recently turned 46, so we're going on 3 years now with the diagnosis. It's been easy since the diagnosis, as far as it coming out and understanding what was going on most of my life. The way I've went about it throughout my life, though, has been difficult before the actual diagnosis came out. It was a long process that, like most of your guests, I believe, did not hit until adulthood. But there were signs early on when I was a young child. Along 2nd grade, there was a lot of talk amongst my teachers, and began to speak with my parents, and they tested me. I remember being a young child and going to have the test taken and talking to my mother and asking, "What do you want me to do on this test? Do you want me to pass it? Do you want me to just let the actual things come out?" And they were like, "Well, you do whatever," but they didn't want me to be diagnosed. So they were like, "Well, if you can pass it, pass it." So I passed it and made it through and got all the answers that I thought the people wanted to hear, just from, what I did while I was masking rather than who I really was. There's a lot of traits other people might notice, though. I often won't make eye contact a lot of times, depending on the situation. I'm always talking very fast. I would have times where I could be aggressive in conversations. And it wasn't necessarily that I was trying to be aggressive, but the way I was raised up, there wasn't a lot of masking in my home. And so there was very to the point, very jagged, rigid talking, very forceful. And it could cross over into a verbal abuse and things that caused a lot of anxiety in my life. I've been told that I walk like I have that autistic walk about me by students. Actually, I had some students that were diagnosed, who the younger generation I noticed as a teacher, they have, a vision for this much more than people in their middle age or older. because they've been raised around it and the information's been there. So they kind of understand it a little bit better than we do as when they see people. So I've learned some of these things just from my own students in high school. I seem pretty good at masking usually a lot of my issues, but I'm probably just unaware that other people aren't noticing. I think I'm covering them up probably, and probably everybody's noticing them. So it's hard to tell if I really have any others that people don't notice. It's probably in my case more I don't realize they don't notice, I'm guessing. Other people might not think I have autism because I've been dealing with it for so long, of course, and my ultimate goal throughout life has been masking to try to fit in with other people. Really, a lot of my life has been about that and studying what it means to be normal around other people. And so as I've grown up and I've tried to study in different subjects that I followed throughout college, history, technology, just the way people interact with things, religion, sociology, it's all been this cobbled together thing of anthropology for me, of why people do what they do, how they do it, because I'm constantly trying to study those people around me, trying to make sure that I hit all the right cues and things. And of course, having a neurodivergent mind means I don't, but I'm really spending all my time in life trying. Having autism or ADHD and any of these things that they tell me are mixed together does have a strength to it. I'm able to grind. I'm able to trigger my hyper focus. I learned how to do that at an early age when I just need to lock in and I need to go. I can just keep going at something like a ridiculously long time. I can boost my interest in it and go to where the normal people just have to quit. They just become tired and lose interest, and I can just grind at it. But in the long run, it is damaging. I need to get that done while I'm in that hyper focus, because if I get out of that, it's very hard to come back to it. So I feel like anybody with a neurodivergent diagnosis or non-diagnosis that deals with these issues has challenges throughout their life because they feel misunderstood often. You may feel lesser than those that are around you that don't have some of these challenges when you have to work harder than other people to accomplish the same things. That's been the case for me, but at the same time, it's been more frustrating that there wasn't an understanding of how I felt. Emotions were very heavy on me. I realized at an early age, more so than they were at everybody else. So that's been a challenging part for me, is just the understanding from other people. My faith has been a resource and a help throughout the whole process. I feel like I've been aware of my faith from an extremely early age. I remember being just 4 and going to my mother about God and deep questions and why the things the way they were, and just wanting to know, like, theology. Why does this do this? Why does that do that? What are the reasons for this? My parents weren't really church-going people. As a small child, we went for a little while when my mom made friends with somebody from a church. When I began to turn into a teenager, though, I was coming out of high school into coming out of middle school into high school, and as a threat, my parents threatened me with sending me to private school, to a Christian school, and then the tables kind of flipped, and I decided I wanted to go instead of them sending me. So being at that Christian school definitely gave me a safe place, I felt like, that didn't have all of the challenges at the start of high school would have for somebody with my brain type. And so that was a good thing, but being there also presented faith challenges. So as I've went through all of these things, trying not to break my whole life down here to a very long story, I see where the neurodivergent condition has had a heavy influence as I've passed through my life as on my faith at different times. It's provided a framework for me when there didn't seem to be anything else. When at home there didn't seem to be a straight and narrow of what was the things that I needed to do and what I didn't need to do and what I needed to focus on. Christianity gave me a frame to set in and an idea of exactly what rules to follow and how to go about that. It made me confident in my own thoughts. It made me trust my own thoughts. I could say, no, this is definitely the way things are. I have this truth, this hold in Christ that has allowed me to know that this is the truth more than I'm just being gaslit by somebody because of my condition. As I've gotten older, though, it's evolved and it's had to change, and that's okay. As we've walked through life, I think we find that we always think we're going to a certain place, but we find in the journey a lot of times we wind up somewhere we didn't think we were going. But it makes a lot more sense when we get there and we're understanding of why. And I really believe God has put me on one of those paths that I didn't necessarily think I would wind up where I am. But part of my diagnosis has been part of my journey and taken me to a place that I think I have a lot of peace. So it's been helpful. It's been hard. But in the end, it's been a great learning experience for me as a whole. I hope anyone else who's dealing with a late diagnosis has patience and has understanding from those around them that will allow them to understand themselves better as they move forward.
My name is William O'Flaherty. I'm currently 61 years old. I received the results of my professional evaluation for autism a few days after my 60th birthday in February 2024. The process was initially difficult. Back around 2006, I became curious about what was then called Asperger's. I was unsuccessful in finding someone to evaluate me. Then fast forward to the end of 2023, when after going through a lot of work-related stress that year, I began to wonder again more seriously if I might be autistic. Then the process was actually easier. The process was easier at this point because I had come across a place that evaluated not just children, but adults for autism. It was then a 3-step process, or should I say a series of 3 appointments. The first was to determine if it was even necessary to do a formal evaluation using a tool called ADOS. I qualified for the next step that also included a few other tools as part of the ruling in and ruling out process. Then the final appointment was the results. Previously, the process was hard because nearly 20 years ago, I don't believe there was anyone in my area who evaluated adults. I tried one place and the scheduling person thought they did, but it turned out not to be true. So I gave up looking for another person, and I believe that place told me they didn't know of any. Additionally, because I was diagnosed with ADHD, inattentive type, back in the 1990s, I didn't think there might be other conditions to explain my experiences for a long time. Others might suspect I'm autistic because I go really deep into topics that interest me, and I have the tendency to interrupt others because of my poor social skills. While being shy is not exclusive to autistics, and some autistics are not shy, that is something very true of me. Others probably notice I don't like small talk, and I don't like being around too many people. I also don't like it when things are unpredictable, so I definitely like routines. Finally, I tend to ask a lot of questions when something is unclear to me, and a lot of times it is. So I probably annoy others with my frequent search for clarity. After being diagnosed, I discovered that I dealt with sensory issues more than I was aware of. About 8 months ago, I decided to try wearing noise-canceling headphones like these without playing any music, and learned that I found it had a very calming effect and helped me focus better. Then, at the end of December 2024, about 3 months ago, I got a weighted blanket and found it very comforting. So much that I decided to get an additional one. The first one was 20 pounds, and then I got a 15-pound one. I use both each night now. Some doubt I'm autistic because they hold, like I used to, an incorrect understanding of what autism is. I didn't fit the stereotypical mold for Asperger's, which is now called Autism Level 1, and that's what my diagnosis is now. Most only consider what is typically associated with level 2 or level 3 autism as characteristics that are really autistic. And those of us with fewer support needs can actually be autistic if we don't act or seem like them. Related to this, the fact that I have a master's degree and work a full-time job goes against the stereotype many have of autism. Also, I'm over 6 feet tall, and everyone knows you can't be tall and autistic. I'm joking, of course, because I do have a sense of humor and I can be sarcastic, things that many often think disqualify a person from being autistic. Finally, over the years, I learned how to mimic or act like someone comfortable in social situations, which I am not. My positive characteristics that are not unique to autistics are my ability to notice patterns or details that others may miss. So I'm good at analyzing. One of those areas involves uncovering quotes attributed to C.S. Lewis that are not by him. I'm considered by others who are actually Lewis scholars to be the world's authority on C.S. Lewis misquotes. I even wrote a book on the topic, so that proves my obsession. I believe my autism has helped me in the area of learning in that I can pick up, in most cases, something fairly quickly. Finally, my autism is a strength in that because of it, I tend to be a rule follower and dependable, so others can trust and count on me. One of the biggest challenges for me as a late diagnosed autistic at the moment is still dealing with the reality of my diagnosis. Because of being good at analyzing, it is easy for me to overanalyze and give into negative thinking. For example, what would my life have been like if I knew I was autistic 30, 20, or even 10 years ago? Social situations are still challenging for me, especially if they are new and unique. I've also learned that while others might view it as I'm slow at processing things, it's actually that I'm dealing with sensory overload most of the time and am trying to filter out things that others more easily are able to filter. My Christian faith has been a central part of my life since I was 16 years old. I'd gone to church before that, but it was at the age of 16 I became more aware of what it meant to be a Christian. And it wasn't just to try to be a good moral person, but instead believing in your heart that God raised Jesus from the dead and confessing him as Lord. Given my autistic tendency to follow rules, I found it comfortable to have a clear direction in right and wrong. While I've been around others who were legalistic about their beliefs, I've managed to avoid that and live what I believe is a healthier Christian life. While I've dealt with doubt when life was difficult, I've always managed to remain steadfast in my faith in the Lord Jesus. Likewise, since my diagnosis, while I've questioned God about why wasn't my autism revealed sooner, I hold on to the belief that he is all-powerful and all-knowing, and I am not.
Mike Westerfield, 48 years old, diagnosed a couple of years ago. The process of getting diagnosed was quite easy here for me. I got diagnosed and got in to see a psychologist in about 4 months. I noticed after watching Love on the Spectrum with my wife, who's a therapist, that I had some unique characteristics that a lot of children with autism have. And I noticed that I used to have or acted in certain ways when I was younger after watching a lot of these episodes on Love on the Spectrum. So this caused me to really think about my childhood and things that happened to me, bullying, and just remembering that I've been masking for years and trying to really act like that or act differently than the way I really felt. I found myself mimicking behaviors. I didn't know how to smile until about 10 years ago. So there's just things that I just thought that everybody felt and everybody did. And after watching Love on the Spectrum and researching autism for about a year, I realized that I had a lot of unique characteristics that were in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that fit the criteria for autism spectrum disorder. So that, and then my youngest daughter was also diagnosed with autism as well. So that had me kind of thinking that there might be a genetic predisposition to autism. The process was easy in comparison to other places and other people that I've heard. it could take up to a year or 2 years from other people that I've talked to who were diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. So I feel like I kind of lucked out because I actually was able to get in about 4 months with a clinic that specializes in diagnosing adults for autism spectrum disorder. I think that some traits that people might notice that I have of being autistic is sometimes I will start going into deep topics about things, or if I find something that I'm interested in, if I'm not careful, I have a tendency to interrupt the conversation, and then I'll start talking about something that I'm really interested in, especially theology, psychology, addiction, stuff like that. So those types of things, when I start talking a lot about something and I go really, really deep into something, those are some traits I think someone might recognize. Somebody might recognize also that I don't like to be around a lot of people. I'm very good at socializing, but I just, after a period of time, I kind of have to get away. I don't like just engaging in conversations for long periods of time with a lot of people. I also don't like small talk. I'm good at it, but it's just something I'm not. I think people can probably tell after a while that there might be some. I'm not going to say it's not genuine, but it might be a little forced at times. Those are probably some things I think of that people might think that about that I might be autistic, especially with the deep thinking, very philosophical, go into subjects very deeply more than the average person. I think people tend to think that they say often like you don't look autistic, so I think people may not notice that how awkward I feel. There's oftentimes I'm always rethinking something that I said. If I say something, there's oftentimes I'm wondering, how did that sound? How did that come across? Man, I feel stupid for saying that. I mean, I can't believe I said that. So people probably don't notice a lot of that thought process that I have of what's going on in the inner chat or the inner dialogue of my mind. People probably don't notice a lot of my sensory issues. There's certain noises, certain sounds that just drive me crazy. But I'm not going to let anybody know that's driving me crazy because I've learned to mask and kind of hide these things. But they probably wouldn't notice those things. They probably wouldn't notice that I have a strong sense of justice. So there are times where I see something going on or somebody's told me about something, and I found myself not really judging people, but I found myself over the years since I was younger, always being a moral, you want to say, a rule follower. So a strong sense of justice, and I may not agree with what somebody's doing, but I want to say something, but I've learned not to speak my mind. So they probably don't notice a lot of that the way I'm feeling inside. I feel like I blend very good into society. I feel like I've learned over the years to mask a lot of characteristics. I remember as I was a kid learning how to even just position my hands at times, or learning how to look or cock my head, even at times trying to learn how to smile. So there's things and characteristics that I've learned to mask over the years. And I think people may not, think I'm autistic just because I might not do a lot of rocking, although I do rock sometimes. I've never been hand flapping or anything like that. Some of these stereotypes that people think all autistic people do, but they don't see me hand flapping or rocking a lot, or just maybe having a meltdown. Although I've had several meltdowns throughout my life, especially as I've gotten older, these meltdowns have not been in the workplace or on my job. They've been when I've gotten home. Typically, when I'm overstimulated, I get home. There's been times I've had a lot of meltdowns. So they may not think I'm autistic because they don't see meltdowns in public view, so to speak. But I'm having them, and they also don't see the shutdowns or the burnouts where I just have nothing in my mind and it's just completely blank. And sometimes I just don't even. I thought it was depression for years. I found out it never was depression. It was just shutdowns. Everything mentally drained, sucked out of my mind. But people don't know that because I've learned to just put on a good mask and just keep talking, especially as being a counselor. I found that with my autism, being a deep thinker and really obsessing over things of interest has caused me to research so many different things in my life that I've been told that I have a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things. I think this is a unique strength, especially within the profession I'm in as a counselor. I love psychology. I love theology. So these things have caused me to research many different things, go to college, a few graduate degrees. So I think in this end, the autism has really helped me in that way. Also, I don't think I don't struggle with theory of mind. So I have an ability to really get in somebody's mind. And I'm very overly sensitive in empathy. So I really care about people very deeply, sometimes to a fault. And I found that this has helped me out as a therapist, because a lot of my clients have really felt that I truly want to help them, which I really do. So I think that is actually I don't hear a lot with people talking about autism, but for me, being like in the social science field, that's really helped me out a lot. It's also autism with being a very strong rule follower. I've tried to raise my children up the best I could, and actually exemplify that behavior of good moral character for my children. So I think it's been a very strong strength with that as well. I also am very faithful to my wife. I don't believe in stepping out or doing anything, and she really appreciates that. So I think that's also with just being a devout follower in my faith, my religious faith, and being a rule follower. I think that's really helped me out as well. I consider those strengths with autism. I remember having meltdowns at about 8 or 9 years old, and never really had any meltdowns until then. And that became challenging at times. I didn't have them a lot, but I did have some meltdowns. As I got older, I noticed meltdowns more as I was an adult. The more I went into the workforce and I started working and things became more complicated, I started recognizing I was having a lot more meltdowns in the law enforcement profession. I'd come home and I just thought I had anger issues. And I kept thinking, what am I angry about? I'm not really angry about anything, but I found out I was overstimulated. So I would say that for sure, the meltdowns have really been a hindrance over the years. I built 2 addiction treatment centers, and through that process, being overly stimulated coming home at night, I was prone to having some meltdowns, and some of the reasons I started questioning me being on the spectrum. But I think those are the biggest drawbacks as well. Shutdowns, just my brain shutting down sometimes, hasn't really affected me. But after sessions and a long day, sometimes I get home and I absolutely have nothing in my brain, and I just have to sit down and just be by myself for a while. So those 2 things I would say have been the biggest struggles for me with being on the spectrum. One other thing, sometimes complicated things I don't get very easily at times. And when I don't, I have a tendency to really get upset internally when somebody might, so there's been people before that called me stupid growing up or something like that. And it wasn't because I was not intelligent. I was just having a hard time processing something. But once I've learned to get it, then everything's good. Those have been some struggles as well. And my last thing, trying to fit in with society and be somebody I'm not just to fit in, it's been exhausting over the years. So my religious faith as a Christian, it was very difficult at first because the element of faith was something that was very, very hard for me to accept. I wanted to prove everything. So I studied apologetics, and that helped lead me to Christ. Actually, I was a Christian minister, left Christianity, was a Muslim for years. And then Jesus appeared to me in a dream. And then that led me back in, and I fully accepted Christ. But if I'm to be honest, I think my autistic brain was a hindrance initially because it was hard for me to walk out on faith. What does that actually mean? Because I'm so used to living my life of trying to prove everything. However, once I walked out on faith and I truly trusted and surrendered to Christ, it just made much more sense. And it makes more sense now after, just with the diagnosis, it's helped me to understand. It has made sense. Things make much more sense with my brain and everything else. And I also have found myself growing stronger in my relationship with Christ due to me feeling that I'm unique in that I am autistic, and there's nothing wrong with it. And there's some strengths that come with that. So I feel like, my autistic brain, although I may have kind of came in between me accepting Christ in the beginning, once I fully surrendered and walked out on faith, it's helped me to have a beautiful relationship and also have a greater love for humanity and recognize truly how we're all different.
I'm William O'Flaherty. Thanks for visiting my channel. Please consider liking and/or sharing this video. Also, feel free to comment and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and watch other videos.